a lot to talk about. We got a lot of cast members here, lots of different storylines, but obviously a lot's been going on with the show. Anything I say would be sort of underselling, you know, the reaction to recent storylines. So, Jason, I do want to sort of kick it off with you. Lexa's death, huge reaction to say the least. What has been your reaction to the reaction?
First of all, thank you for having us back at WonderCon. It's an honor to be able to talk about the show. You know, the reaction has obviously been surprising to us, to me in particular. I didn't ever imagine that it would be so intense. You know, we designed it to be a ride. We designed it to be emotional. Of course, the show's a tragedy. Horrible things happen in every episode. But this landed in a different way for our audience, especially LGBTQ fans of the show. And you know, one of the things that sort of began to drive it home for me was I watched fan reaction videos sort of religiously on Friday mornings, and on this particular Friday, I couldn't watch them. They were too intense. The audience, one after the next, they were devastated by what they saw. And, you know, we as artists and writers and actors, you know, we don't want to hurt people. And I feel like this touched something real. It touched a nerve. It activated something in people who, you know, their whole lives have had to deal with things that me as a straight white guy, you know, obviously couldn't relate to. So I was very surprised by it. I've apologized for that. We never really, I think, understood the power of that relationship and that character. And so knowing what I know now, I would have done some things differently. That's an acknowledgement that I need to make.
Let me ask you a bit more about that, you know, because you did an interview last week with TV Insider, and you mentioned that you felt, you know, you stand by the story, and the story would stay the same, but yet you also have said that you would have it play out differently. Can you maybe elaborate on looking back now?
Yeah, I mean, when you do press, for me, I'm not very good at it, frankly, and, you know, I think I'll probably prove that today multiple times. The truth is, when I was answering that question, I was thinking that the question meant, and certainly in my mind it meant, would you still follow through with killing this character? And the answer is, I know it's not going to make everybody happy, but the answer is yes. But I would do things differently. I feel like, you know, there's a couple things. There's three real areas here that I think I've messed up a little bit and would love to have done better. One is sort of my social media interaction with the fans in some way set up around this relationship an unrealistic expectation that Lexa would be okay, that she'd walk off into the sunset. And really the only promise explicitly that I've ever made about the show, and guys, I apologize for saying this, but nobody is safe. You know, that's the kind of show it is. And so I do think that, you know, I regret the way that I talked about the show on social, because obviously I'm excited. I get excited about the show. I love the fact that we have a bisexual lead. I love the fact that, you know, a new audience came to the show because of this relationship. And I was excited, and I was sharing my excitement, and that was misinterpreted to mean that I was promising, like, a happy ending. And then the other thing is the show itself and the way the episode played out. I feel like there's a couple things that I wish we got better, you know, did better, which, you know, one of them is the sex and death happening so close together. I definitely am uncomfortable with that juxtaposition now. For me at the time, it didn't mean, you know, obviously for me, the death had nothing to do with the fact that she just had sex. It was, you know, this powerful, transformative figure who was killed because she was trying to change her people. And that's always dangerous, as history, I think, has proven. And so that's why she died, and that's why I sort of allowed those two scenes to coexist like that. But in hindsight, I do wish that I'd figured out a way to separate them somehow. And the other thing is the stray bullet. A lot of people have said, you know, Lexa was this amazing, powerful character, and she should have had a heroic death. And, you know, on the one hand, I get that completely. She was, and I totally believe you when you say that you know, that would have made it better for you. But at the same time, this show really doesn't traffic in heroic battlefield deaths, you know? I mean, not to say we would never do that. Sometimes we do sort of self-sacrificial things, of course, and maybe that would have been a way to go, but I was trying to make a different point. I was trying to make the point that life is fragile, and somebody even as powerful as Lexa could die because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. that was the tragedy that I was trying to underline. And again, I wish I knew more about this trope back then, and I wish because had I done my homework about it, I probably would have come upon the fact that in Buffy, a character that was also a lesbian died by a straight bullet, and I was unaware of that because I didn't watch that show. And so, I would have, for sure, just for creative reasons alone, tried to differentiate our execution of that idea. And so here that would have for sure been something that I would have tried to move the pieces around the board, but to try to make the same point that life is fragile. And then I'm not going to monopolize the whole panel, I promise, but the last thing is, my reaction to the reaction, as you call it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was mind-blowing for me, and I totally freaked out, and I, have never been associated with anything even close to it, and so it took me a while to figure it out. At first, I was obviously defensive. I retweeted some stupid things that I shouldn't have retweeted and took down pretty quickly, and eventually I was able to sort of take myself out of it and listen and understand where the anger was coming from and understand what we had sort of tapped into unintentionally. And, going forward, I think, obviously, we need to be aware of the power of the stories that we're telling and that our audience is seeing it through their own experience, and that, in this case, I underestimated it for sure. In season 4, which we just got, I plan on applying that for sure in the room.
I don't want to ignore all these cast members who are nice enough to come here today. My only one follow-up I did want to ask was on the social media side, because it is a tricky thing, and obviously fans love that interaction, they love the accessibility. For you, do you just are you going to approach it in a different way now, given the criticism you got?
The answer is, unfortunately, yes. I think I need to be careful, obviously, because the excitement that I showed on Twitter, which is what that was, again, set up this expectation that somehow, we weren't going to blow it. We were going to do something different with Lexa, and somehow she was going to walk off into the sunset. And, I obviously, Twitter is 140 characters, and it's like haiku. You can write essays on what people have said in 140 characters, which means that what I say is interpreted by, people to mean what they want it to. And so, I have to be much more careful, obviously, going forward. For sure.
Hi, my name is Stacia.
Hi, Stacia.
My question is mainly for Jason and Eliza, but anybody else can give feedback. I wanted to know if you guys were aware of the Trevor Project and the fact that $81,000 has been raised in honor of Lexa. So my question for you is, are you aware of the positive influence that the LGBT community has, and how will that influence you moving forward?
Well, absolutely, I am aware of that, and I do think that that's an incredible silver lining in all of this, for sure. Warner Brothers, by the way, supports the Trevor Project, as do I, and I actually, believe it or not, look at this whole thing that's happened, although it's been hard for me personally, boo-hoo me, but, the truth is it's a positive. It's really opened my eyes in a lot of ways to, again, the power that stories have in the world, and the responsibility that I have as a storyteller, both in the way I communicate via social media, of course, and promises, implicit or not, that I might make, and the stories themselves. We need to understand, I think, going forward, how our audience is going to react to something. It's like the metaphor that I use is, you build a roller coaster, and you're an engineer, and you want to make that roller coaster awesome, and you want to make the dips and the loops and everything, death-defying. But you don't want the train to jump off the tracks and hurt people. You want to get to the end of the ride. And I feel like in this case, the train jumped off the track a little bit. We didn't really, I'm going to say me, I didn't really understand enough, I don't think. And so now I do, and I'm grateful for the experience at the end of the day. Truly, I am. And the Trevor Project is amazing. Everybody should give some money to the Trevor Project, please.
Thank you. Next question? Last question.
Hello, everyone. My question is for Jason. Why was the decision made to integrate the creative team and the fan base online, and specifically into the LGBT group, which is so vulnerable and voice their concerns and fears so frequently? And I mean specifically not just answering Twitter questions or on Tumblr, but specific staff members going into LGBT safe zones like forums and stuff, and going into discussions where they weren't brought up, and saying things like, if you guys don't trust us by now that we're not going to kill Lexa, you guys need counseling, things like that specifically. That's why the fandoms.
You know, first of all, if those things happened, and I don't doubt for a second that you are 100% right, I'm sorry. We didn't, it's not some grand conspiracy to hurt people. You know, speaking for myself, I was excited about it, really excited about it. It was a real part of the show, and a huge part of the season, obviously. And so I think my exuberance probably is to blame in part for people having this expectation that the end was going to be different, and I am sorry about that. As for what you're talking about, I'm not really aware of it. I don't really, again, it wasn't a grand conspiracy that we were trying to hurt people. We were just excited about a show that we were making. And I realize now that, sort of a perfect storm of a case against me and against others on our show, I think you could really, I would love to ask the question, what possibly, we would be crazy and cruel if we were trying to deliberately hurt people. Like, we were trying to tell a story and we were excited about it, and in hindsight, obviously mistakes were made, as I said, and I'm sorry about it, but we never intended for it to be a painful experience for you, honestly.
Do you think it's that interesting line of it, because of course you don't want to give away the secrets of your show, but at the same time, how coy can you be versus, what you say beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, communicating about this show in particular and not ruining things is difficult, always. And I think less is probably more, for sure. And this was tricky. This was tricky again, I understand that somebody who was crushed by this episode, by this character's death, then looking back at the things, again, speaking only for myself, things that I was saying, like, this is the best episode ever, and, somebody who was crushed by it, looking back and remembering me saying, I think the best episode ever is the one that devastated me. Well, what an asshole you must think I am. But honestly, at the time that I was saying this is the best episode ever, I didn't realize that it was going to crush you. I thought it would be an emotional journey for sure. But, again, hopefully going forward I can apply the lesson, and be more careful, certainly, with the fans on social media.
All right, guys, thank everyone from the 100, which is coming back this Thursday for a run of 8 more episodes for the season, and then season 4 will be on. It's coming out today.
Thank you.
So